So I'm Miranda Smith. I'm doing my master's at ODU right now in computer science. And this summer, for my internship, I did software development for the human-machine interface team. And the rest of my team, the HMI team, led by Lisa Levy, we had Mary Carolyn Last, who left not too long ago, Brian Barrows, and Erica Mazeros, who were all a lot of help. There we go. Okay, so to put my work in context, the big project that we're working under is a tractor. And a tractor's goal is to establish a basis for certification of autonomous systems using trust and trustworthiness. And within that project, the HMI team, our goal is to create an interface utilizing natural interaction to facilitate trustworthy multi-asset teaming. And the current direction of the research is with the Hinge experiment. And the Hinge experiment stands for Human Informed Natural Language GAN Evaluation. And a GAN is a machine learning algorithm that you give it a description and it's supposed to generate an image for you. And the purpose of this experiment is twofold. One, help gather descriptions to help train this GAN, and secondly, use metrics to determine the best input method for the interface, whether that's speech or text. So this is the second Hinge experiment. The first one was Hinge Cafeteria, and that was set up previously, and the team did it on NASA Center at the cafeteria, which is why it's called Hinge Cafeteria. And they had people describe images, first in one context, just asking them to describe the image, and then a second context, asking them to describe the image in a search and rescue context, asking them, this person's missing, please describe them so we can find them. And so now we're trying to repeat the experiment in Mechanical Turk. So we're calling it Hinge Mechanical Turk. And Mechanical Turk is an Amazon web service where you give Amazon a task that you want completed, and they will use their workers that people have signed up to be, and their workers will complete tasks for small amounts of money. So it's a way for us to get a large amount of data so we can get a larger population. Okay, so what I did in the context of this was two things. I worked a lot with Mechanical Turk, helping pioneer the Mechanical Turk capability for NASA, because across all of the centers, no one's actually used Mechanical Turk before in any of the centers in an experiment. So I helped create a script to interact with the API that we're going to be using in-house, and then documenting all of the processes and lessons learned of how to interact with the different interfaces that Mechanical Turk has, so that can then be used later on too. And I also created 2 Mechanical Turk hits, and a hit is just a human intelligence task. That's just what they call their tasks that they give to their workers. And I created an audio task, so they had to describe the pictures verbally, and then a text one where they just had to type a description. And the other stuff I did was more of a storyboard interface. So looking at a search and rescue mission, or a search and locate with what we're using, search and almost rescue, whatever term you want to use for it, during an in-progress mission, I looked at different ways and components that we could use to show like an overview, keeping track of how the mission is progressing and keeping track of all the different assets that are in your mission. And then also how that would interact with an asset view or a detail view, how you want to have your interface look when you're looking through a specific asset. And from one of those, I did a Unity mod in the Attractor Unity project we've already got. And I created a P cockpit, and that stands for Per Entity Adjustable Cockpit. So going more in depth for the mechanical Turk work. So the first thing I did with Mechanical Turk was creating that script to interact with the API, because Amazon was going to be creating those hits for us. So the only way we were able to interact with it was through the API instead of their online interface. And we decided that that wasn't going to be a good move, a good path, and I later recreated those hits in-house, so then we could interact with it through the web interface also. So now we've just got two options, and it might be used later on. So this is a video showing how to go about creating a hit through the web interface. Okay, and this is just going to show one of how it's created, and then it's going to show how to publish it and how to get the results from it. So the first part is just getting the template that they give you, and then giving it the metadata, like the title of what you want to call it, how much you want to pay each worker for doing it, how many workers you want to do it, what restrictions you want on the workers that are able to complete it. And then the next screen, it gives you the actual HTML template for what they want it to look like. And I just did a quick copy and paste from code that I developed in my own IDE. So it's a very quick copy and paste of something that took a long time to develop. And then what that creates will be shown in the next video. This is just showing how to manage it and how to create it. And I'll let it continue go through. Okay, and now it's publishing it. And you get a preview of the hit. You get to see how much it cost, and you just say publish. It's not a super difficult process. And then now once it's in progress or workers have completed it, this is how you get the results from it. And you can see it in progress, and you can see only the text information that you're getting from them. You've got to store the audio elsewhere. And you're able to reject answers, which I did in this one because they were all just test answers. And then it'll put another hit out there for the one you rejected, so you still get your total number. The next one, and that's the easy part, just showing how to interact with the interface. And a lot of that was going through and figuring out how to work with the different interfaces and then writing the documentation for it that we might use later for lessons learned. So this one is the actual run through of what the worker might see, well, will see, not might see, of how they're going to go through and complete it. And this is that quick copy and paste that I did of the code developed. And this is really just HTML and a lot of JavaScript, because it can only be one page, so you've just got to hide and show things to make it seem like you're flipping through things. So the instructions for that was to just describe an image verbally based off the context given, and then transcribe it. Testing. And they accept it, they do the audio check.
A man standing in front of a bus in the snow posing for a picture.
And then you see it's a lot of small checks to make sure it's getting good data. Like there was things as far as the audio check to make sure that their audio is working. They have to verify it so we know their volume's working also. And then
in the winter.
To model the first experiment, we also only give them one chance to record something. So when they hit stop, they automatically go straight to the transcription. They don't get a second chance to do it. And then we noticed as people go to transcribe, because in the first experiment, they only did the audio recording, and then the team did the transcription. So we figured it would be easy for them to transcribe it.
A little girl is riding a horse.
You're just hearing exactly what's getting typed there.
It's a man with a red sweater on, blue shorts,
like it auto
black
plays
shoes with a white hat
what you've recorded,
in the
because we
snow
did notice some people
on a
like
mountain.
to just type it from memory. And it's a lot of small checks like that to make sure we're going to get as good of data as we possibly can from it. And then they've got the audio controls so they can replay it as much as they want to get a good transcription. And this is the second context. The person went missing an hour after the picture was taken. Using one sentence, please describe them to help us find them. And we're trying to compare the different descriptions people give based off that context.
It's a Caucasian boy about 3 or 4 years old in winter clothes, red accessories, a blue jacket, and he's riding a green bike. A Caucasian girl about 10 years old with
It's really
long
just showing
brown hair,
there's volume,
yellow shirt,
there's
tan
audio,
pants, and
it's getting
wearing a black
recorded, it's
helmet,
getting played
and
back,
she's
and
currently
we've
on
got
a
to save
horse.
it. And then they've got a lot of, oh, and another check was making sure they can't hit continue until they actually start typing stuff. So you can't accidentally go to the next picture without
a mustache,
having at least typed something
wearing a
in,
black hoodie
because
with
you
yellow
can't go back. They
graphics,
can't fix any mistakes they
brown
make.
pants, and he's
So
currently
it's
standing
all
at
a bunch
what
of
looks like a bus
checks
stop.
running through testing it to make sure we're going to get good data from it. And then after they go through the second context, we ask them for demographic information to see if there's any kind of biases in how they're describing something, like education level, the area they learned to talk, so any kind of phrases we're not used to, the area they learned their language would would help us figure out why we're getting certain phrases at certain times. And so that's just one of the hits. I'm not going to show the other one where it's just typing. It's the same process, except they're just typing the description. So I just showed the more complicated one. Yes?
Can you select more than one area, or you're forced to select?
You're forced to just select one. Because in the first experiment, they were allowed to say one and then say, and maybe this one too, but we didn't actually use that data, and only, 2 or 3 people did it. So we decided not to let them choose more than one area. And one thing that we did specifically was making sure we're showing all 5 images in the first context, and then the same 5 images again in the second context, all in the same hit instead of breaking it up, because we didn't want to burn participants on how they're describing it. We didn't want them to see the second context until they'd gone through all of the first one, because they didn't in the first experiment, and we didn't want to accidentally bias the data. And we wanted as many people to be able to go through the experiment as possible, instead of just having one person describe one photo, and that's all we can use you for. So the second half of the work I did was on the interface mock-ups for how it would work. And that was a lot of collecting different types of components we might use, what type of information we would want on a certain view, whether that's the overview of the mission or the detailed view of the asset, and getting different ideas of what our options are to build a base for future decisions. And on the left here, you've got the asset views, whether that's looking from a quadcopter or a rover or a fixed wing. And then you've got mission views, whether you're where you want to keep track of the entire progress. And that's more of storyboarding ideas, and to make sure we've got as broad of a base as possible to start with before we make any kind of final interface decisions. Once I did the drawing up of the storyboard, I chose a specific part, and that's the detail view, to create a mod in Unity for. And that's what PCockpit is. And it stands for Per Entity Adjustable Cockpits. So this is it starting Attractor Unity. And the original one is Attractor Unity, and then you've got PCockpit on the right. I don't know if I'm in the way or you can see. And what I did was changing how the UI looked, changing the position of the camera, because you're going to be looking at the asset through a camera that's actually on the vehicle is the end goal. So I changed where that was at, and I included a speedometer, which is what it's zoomed in on now. And the point behind this wasn't getting the image to look exactly how we wanted it. It was to get the logic behind it to work properly. So right now it's really easy to go through and give it a different image, tell it what angles you want at, and now you've got any kind of speedometer you want that works with a needle. And this one's looking at the rover, and you can see you've got the mini map up at the top. And you've also got a different view based off of what vehicle you're on. So right now we're looking at a quad. So it's got a different cockpit view based off of the vehicle type. We'll just let this play and it's also being able to, so this is a zoom in of the mini map that was at the top. And this is making sure you're able to replace the actual vehicle you're looking at with an icon. So that's not, we've got a camera up above the vehicle following it, but it's not actually showing the vehicle. It's showing an icon, which is going to be a lot easier to see and to tell what's going on in a small mini map instead of seeing what the actual vehicle is going to look like. And it's going to give it that icon based off of the vehicle type. And you can see it's interacting with a rover that's also in the simulation. Current issue right now is that you can't determine what type of vehicle it is if it's not the one being controlled. So it's not getting the icon, it's just showing what it would look like as the object running around. And you can see it's following it around no matter where it's at, what angle it's at. It's got the logic behind it to do that. And let me go back. So the second speedometer that was on the quad, the radial one, Unity is able to create a circular speedometer really easily if it's an entire circle or if it's exactly a half circle. So what I did was go through and create the logic to create one that's not. You just tell it how much of an angle is taken out at the bottom there, and it would be able to calculate the speed gotten from the vehicle properly. And the only other thing of note with that was that the mini-map, along with the camera, getting the mini-map camera only able to see the icon instead of the vehicle, it's making sure the actual main camera is not going to see the icon as it's being loaded. And all of that was really just a template that's going to be able to easily be reused to create further interfaces, to create those components and reposition them however you would want it. A lot of the reusable stuff is the back end getting it to work, because the actual what it's going to look like is something that's going to change right up until the very end. So in conclusion, this is what I did this summer. I did a lot of the work with Mechanical Turk with creating the human intelligence tasks, a lot of documentation of the processes so that people here and on other centers are able to use it. And then the interface designs as far as coming up with a storyboard, the different components and the pros and cons of those, and then creating the Unity mod, P-Cockpit. And thank you very much to everyone that helped me out a lot this summer. Yeah.
At some point you mentioned that once you piece your code, Amazon will sort of shuffle things around.
Yeah, that's okay. Let me go back to the slide where it was doing it, management process. So the part in here where I copy and paste the code in there and then I hit source, the question was that I'd mentioned previously that Mechanical Turk pre-processes your code. Because probably for security issues, it makes sense that they would need to do that. They don't want people putting stuff up that might hurt others. So what happens is I would create this hit working on my own local machine, and I would just run it as a local file on Firefox, whatever browser I wanted. But once I copy and paste it and hit source on the next part right there, it pre-processes it and changes the code to whatever it wants, and it doesn't quite tell you what it's changing or anything. You just kind of have to test it and see if anything broke, and you don't really know what it wants to get rid of or what it doesn't like. It's a lot of guessing and testing, because they've got documentation that tells you what they don't want, but they don't follow that. So
So what's an example of what they don't want?
you know how I had that blinking icon of the microphone, the red one, when it was recording? They don't want that to be on a button for some reason. They don't want any kind of icons on a button. Certain HTML tags, they just will get rid of them. Or they'll break up one div container you've got because you've got something in it, or they don't like the format of how you did it. So they'll break it apart to fit their needs.
And you don't get a, hey, here's what we changed.
No, you don't get any kind of...
742.
No, you don't get any kind of heads up of what they've changed. Yeah, yeah. Apparently they do not like to encourage any kind of interactivity, but for what we wanted the experiment to look like, that's what we needed. So that's what I did.
Is it just to adhere to some Amazon design document, like so that the site looks like Amazon itself?
They didn't really say why they didn't want them. I assumed it was more for security issues than design issues, because they honestly don't make them look like Amazon at all, going through like different hits that are already created to see what they've done, which is kind of how I figured out, hey, nobody's actually putting any icons on the buttons after I'd struggled with it. It's like they're all doing words because they can't.
That's such an interesting thing that they don't want you to do.
I know. I don't know.
There's a design document somewhere saying don't do that.
If there is a design document, I did not see it.
Maybe copyright issues for pictures. Who knows? Clip art.
Yeah.
Who knows?
And I mean, they'll let you put pictures up there, no issue. So
You just can't put a picture on a button.
you just you can't use icons in that icon tag, or there were a few. I think Span and they're just like, we don't like this, we're going to delete it. And it's just... And then any kind of audio players or recorders, they don't like any kind of plugins like that. They will not use them. So this one's using the default one. So how that looked was in Firefox, so it's going to look different on Chrome. So it means you can't put extra buttons like rewind 15 seconds without a lot of work of writing your own really simple one, because they won't let you reuse any kind of plugins that are already out there. Yeah, Andrew?
Do you have like a favorite takeaway, I guess, that you worked on, or something that you got to work with more that you had?
Well, I've worked with JavaScript a little bit, and I feel like I like it more now that I've gone through through that. I feel like we have an understanding more now. But the one I enjoyed more was definitely the Unity part, learning how to use that and create the mod in it. Yeah.
Well, I'll follow on to that question.
Mhm.
If you were able to stay longer,
Mm-hmm.
what would you want to do? Where would you focus your time?
I would probably focus my time, well, I know there's specific things. One with the hit that needs to be finished, because the audio needs to be stored in a specific spot that we don't have set up yet. So getting that running wouldn't take a lot of work, but I would like to be able to finish that and get it running. And then with the Unity part, I wanted to be able to get a vertical speed and getting the minimap camera, getting the other objects in the scene, getting icons on those. And then one comment I didn't actually make with the camera, I did figure out you don't want to do a camera viewport as just showing a camera's view up at the top. You want to map it to a texture, because then you're actually able to do effects like making it circular or making it fade to transparent. You've got to map it to a texture and then set it as a raw image. So it's just small things like that I figured out as I went.
And if you could stay and do anything you want,
If I
and
could.
you just
play and learn,
Mhm.
where would you focus your time?
Oh.
Enjoy the most, I guess.
I definitely enjoy the Unity stuff a lot. Um,
So is this changing your view of your future at all?
a little bit, yeah. I do like the work I've done a lot here versus more data analysis stuff that I was doing previously. So I've definitely enjoyed that, and I would want to further go in that direction.
Well, let's thank her. Thank you.
Mm.